Hey guys, Wintermute here, and today I'll be making a tiny robot character in Blender. Now, this tutorial might take a while, so I may have to split it into parts. Let's get started. So first, we'll start modeling our robot. So it's going to be symmetrical, so the first thing we do is we add a mirror modifier. Make sure to turn on clipping when you do this, so that the sides of the mirror stay the same and they don't end up tearing the model like that. So make sure clipping is on. So we'll be focusing a lot about the construction of mechanical parts in this and trying to make this look moderately physically possible, though we won't spend too much time on that, because it can get a bit tedious. So first why don't we start with the legs? So in order to do that, we are going to make a quick joint. I'm not sure what kind of joint this is exactly. That's okay. So we'll just take the default cube, scale it up, and now we'll select these two edges and we'll hit bevel. So we'll hit Control B, and now we'll take a side view look at this. Now you see that these are at 45-degree angles, which is good, so we'll just scroll this up, and then we'll scroll up on the mouse wheel in order to increase the bevel segments. So we have something like that. By the way, if you're wondering why my model looks like this, you can go into here, turn on Madcap, and you can change some of the settings so that your model has a different sort of color. And you also want to turn on cavity, so that you can see more of the shadows and depth, and it just looks cooler in general. So this will be sort of like the outer socket thing. We'll put in sort of an inset, so hit I twice, and then we can take this region, deselect this face, and then we'll extrude it in a bit. We have this cool outline part. So next we need a part that fits in here, and doing that's pretty easy. So what we're going to do is actually make it from the original object. So we'll select this face, we'll hit Shift D, and we'll move it up a bit. Then while we're still in edit mode, we're going to hit P and then separate by loose parts. So now we have something that fits snugly in the joint. We'll scale it down just a little bit on the x-axis, so not quite touching the edge. Let's move it to the corner, and then we'll scale it up once to the top of this joint, and then again a bit further. And we might as well do the same thing to this. Actually, that's looking a bit wide. Why don't we make it a bit smaller? So just move the socket up for now. And here for this joint, we're going to narrow it down a bit. So we're going to add a couple of loop cuts with Control R. And then we'll select these two faces, and then we'll scale it down so we have a trapezoidal sort of shape. And if you want to make these edges actually circular, all we have to do is that same bevel trick. So we select those edges and then we just bevel them. There you go. Now so the origin's at the bottom, so we can just move our model down. In edit mode, hit tab and then come back up. And then our origin is going to be situated nicely, so we can actually rotate this piece. We can also add some more cool details if we just go into the object. We'll just narrow it down, we'll hit extrude, and then we'll narrow down this piece. And we can add a couple more of these as we go up. Don't worry about uniformity of size too much. It's not super important in this case. This is going to ultimately be a rather small component, so we may not be seeing it too often. Anyways, okay, so now we have this object. So I was thinking to let this be the leg. So what does that mean? Well, this section, I guess we can extrude out a bit further, and then we can make this the foot. Oops. Be careful about the faces you're selecting, of course. And then we'll extrude this outwards. And this side as well. Extrude it in. Or rather, maybe, why don't we just extrude it all the way out first, block out the size of the foot. It'll be something like this. And then just shape the foot. Again, this doesn't really have to be too precise. We're just picking a pretty random shape here. As long as it doesn't look too weird, it'll be fine. Okay, so we can make more of those inset looking things like that. And I was thinking to make this end bit a lot smaller. I don't know, you might call it a heel or something. Alright, cool, so we have a robotic foot looking thing. And now we kind of want the same joint on both sides, so how do we do that? Well, simple enough. We can add a mirror modifier, another one. Except this time on the z-axis. And we will have to relocate the origin. So you want to hit the backslash button, and then we can go into the local view. You can delete this face because we're not going to be seeing it. And then we'll move this up. Now you can see that we can like intersect the models, which is not good, which is why we need to turn on clipping, and they won't intersect anymore. So stretching this will determine how long our actual leg thing will be, so I think about that long should be enough. And then we'll hit backslash again to return us to the normal view. And there we go. So we have a foot. Now, let's make that joint again, because separating it from the foot might be kind of difficult, or rather, we may be able to just take this part, duplicate it, and then hit P, select, split it by loose parts, and then we'll have this section. We're going to be a bit lazy, and we're just going to copy this part from the foot, so we don't have to make another sort of joint. So you want to select all of these. I would suggest you don't select this middle edge though. Extrude it down. Take out this edge. There we go, we have our old joint. It would have been easier if you actually did this before extruding the foot out of it, but that's alright. Okay, so we want to flip this. So you want to position it here, roughly, and then Shift Z, -1, will flip it about the origin. And just make sure you have a nice fit there before we move it upwards a bit. So we're going to extrude it upwards, move it in because this section is quite a bit too big. Move it in on this axis, so the y-axis I think. And we have a bit of a narrower section this way. We'll make another inset cut thingy. I think mechanically these things would actually weaken the structure, but you know what? That doesn't matter because I think they look kind of cool. Now, it occurs to me that this foot might be a little bit too long. Maybe we can shrink it a bit. Okay, so we're going to mirror this again on the z-axis. So again, we'll go delete this top face. And then we'll add a second mirror. Make sure clipping is on again, and then you can see how these two objects just merge nicely like that. Now we want to apply both of these mirror modifiers. And then we can move the origins into position, roughly around there. Now when we actually get to rig these, the position of the origin doesn't really matter too much, and we'll see that later, but for now it's useful just to have a feel of how this is going to react. So we have this joint here, and we only want movement on this x-axis. We don't want any other movement because of the way this joint is. If we had a ball and socket joint, which I will add at the top, then we can permit three-dimensional movement, but this one will be locked except on the x-axis. Alright, now, so let's make a shoulder structure. And also, this model's looking a bit big, so we'll scale it down a bit. You can hit period if you have a number pad. And if you don't have a number pad, you might want to set this to something more convenient on a laptop, say. But you want to hit period to zoom into your object. There we go. So we'll have the knees bent slightly forward. I think that might make it a bit easier to rig. Alright, cool. So we have one leg. And now we'll make a shoulder structure. So we'll have this biggish plate. We'll bevel one edge of it, like this. And this one we want a flatter bevel. We want it big enough, sort of that the leg is protruding out of it. And then what we can do is we can take these three faces, or rather, why don't we inset them a bit. And then we can take these three faces and extrude them in. Then we have our section that looks like this. So cool, we have this shoulder plate thing. You don't need to worry about that joint at the top, you won't be able to see it anyways. And you want to have this thing positioned roughly in the middle of the structure. I don't know, it doesn't matter too much. Now we want to connect this to sort of a main chassis, so why don't we just build that right now? I'd like to set the origin to the middle. I think we can do this. Control-Shift-Alt-C unless they change the keyboard shortcut, which they have. Alright, that's fine, we'll just do it manually. So what we want to do is we want to move the origin over to this edge, and then we'll remove this whole structure over here. Also, you see that this thing has a slight rotation on the wrong axis, which you don't want, so I'll reset the rotation, and we'll try rotating again. And there we go, now it's nice and straight. So we'll mirror this again. Make sure I do it on the correct axis, none of these, Z-axis. Alright, so we have a cool tank. I guess this would be a tank looking thing. You can delete that inside face. and then we'll turn on clipping to merge the two sides. Alright, so we have some weird geometry in the top because I did not do this properly, so all we have to do... Actually, I'm not sure what this is. Looks like we have some sort of overlapping face out here. Ah, I see. Okay, I think this edge is above the rest, right. Alright, so now we've kind of messed up the top. So if you ever want to flatten something aligned to one of the three-dimensional planes, all you have to do is S, and then the plane, which in this case will be the XY plane, and then hit 0, and then we have it all flattened out now. Perfect. Okay, so this middle section I didn't have too many ideas for. I guess we can make more of these weird-looking inset things. Bevel the edges, and I don't know, maybe we could add like a camera or something. Also, like a backpack. Ah, no, that looks bad. Okay, so maybe we'll just add a big lens in that middle section. An easy way to do that. So if you look at some pictures of lenses, you'll see that they have, it's just like a lot of concentric circles and a bit of surface detail. So you want to move this into position. So we'll move it out so we can see it. Then you want to make sure you're selecting either edges or vertices. And we can extrude it in a bit. We'll fix it on the edge of the object. And then we're going to inset the hell out of this. So maybe 1, 2, 3. And then this outer ring can be extruded inwards. And then inset again. Now we have sort of a gentle slope. And again. Another ring. There we go. Now this might look a bit weird, so you want to shade smooth. To get rid of those artifacts, you need to add an edge split modifier. So you can just go find it, or you hit E and that works too. And then those weird artifacts are gone. And there we go. So now we have a sort of a lens. Alright, so despite how mechanically unstable this thing looks, that's alright. We weren't making this to be too mechanically accurate. Okay, now we want to duplicate this leg and we can move it over to this side. And there we go, we have a sort of bipedal robot. This thing actually feels a bit too wide. Also, I've noticed the circle's off center, and so is this. So we'll hit Alt-G to reset the location, and we'll move it back up. And we'll make sure that lens piece fits. There we go. And we want to have both of the legs back. So again, don't be too precise, we just need to have it fit roughly in the middle of this structure. Alright, cool. Now, one last thing, some sort of a thing to hold a weapon. So I was thinking we would just add a simple ball and socket joint at the top. Just like that. So this holder is just going to be a torus. Maybe bevel the edge slightly. And then a sphere in the middle. That kind of looks like a donut on his head. Okay, forget the sphere then. Sorry, forget the torus. So we'll just have a hemisphere. And this can be static, so we'll just remove the bottom. Just to save on vertices, you know? shade it smooth, and now he has a little hat. So to this hat, I'm going to maybe add a couple cuts. We'll re-add an edge split modifier. And then we want to have an arm protruding out of it. So why don't we reuse this structure again? So now we're going to have to move it in the middle. So we'll duplicate it, and we'll move it up. That looks about right. Okay, let me just rotate it. Okay, great. So you do want this thing to fit, so maybe we'll add a bit more volume to the back. Actually, we can add a lot more. And then what we might want to do is bevel this section here. And then we have sort of a balance. Why don't we even just make an afterburner or something? This part we can just extrude inwards, and we have, I don't know what this is, like a stinger or something. Alright, cool. So we have this ball and socket, and some sort of extendy machine at the end. And what I want to do is add this sort of like magnetic plate to hold whatever sort of weapon you can think of. Right here. So you want to position this so it's roughly parallel to this end surface. And we can scale it on the local Z axis by double tapping Z. And there we go, we have a plate. Okay, so the modeling section of our robot's done. And so I guess we'll go to the rigging portion next time. So I'll see you in the next tutorial. I hope this was useful, and please consider leaving a subscribe if you found it helpful. Bye!